kingdom in ruins, a prophet of fire, and a queen whose name became a curse. Wait until you see how the ancient spirit of manipulation still operates today. In this video, we unmask the ivory palace of Jezebel to reveal a truth that will shake your soul. Stay to watch the divine reckoning that no makeup could hide. Do not miss a single second, for your spiritual heritage is at stake. This is the Bible teaches, and the truth starts now. The story does not begin in Israel. It begins on the shores of the Mediterranean, in the city-states of Tyre and Sidon, where the sea meets commerce and faith mingles with blood. To understand Jezebel, you must understand where she came from. She was not merely a strong-willed woman. She was the product of a lineage of priest-kings who believed absolute power was a divine right, regardless of the human cost. Her father, Ethbal, did not ascend the throne by natural succession. He was a priest of Ashtoreth who murdered his own king to seize the crown. Jezebel grew up in a palace where treason was the tool of governance and assassination was seen as a testament of strength. From the cradle, she learned that morality was a weakness of common men and that the gods, Baal and Ashtoreth, demanded blind obedience and extreme sacrifice. While the daughters of Israel learned the law of Moses, justice, and compassion, Jezebel was trained in the liturgy of terror. She saw the smoke of Phoenician altars rising to the sky, often carrying the scent of human sacrifice. To her, religion was a tool for mass control. The sacred was whatever she decided was sacred, and it was this mindset, and forged in the iron and fire of Tyre, that she packed into her silk robes to carry into the heart of God's people. Israel, in those days, was a vulnerable nation. The northern kingdom was in constant tension. They had wealth, they had armies, but they had a void in their soul. King Omri, Ahab's father, saw a commercial opportunity in Phoenicia. He wanted the sea roots, the cedar wood, and the gold, and the price of this trade agreement was his son's soul. Ahab did not just marry a woman, he signed a pact with a spiritual system that hated everything Israel stood for. Imagine the day Jezebel's procession crossed the borders of Samaria. It was not just a bride arriving, it was a silent invasion. The sound of Phoenician trumpets drowned out the prayers in Israelite homes, and the people, fascinated by foreign beauty and the promise of prosperity, did not realize they were opening the doors to their own destruction. When Jezebel settled in Samaria, she did not behave like a guest. She behaved like the owner of the house. The first thing she noticed was that the God of Israel, the Lord, had no image. He was invisible. He demanded holiness, justice, and obedience to laws written on stone tablets. To a narcissist like Jezebel, a God who cannot be seen and who makes moral demands is an obstacle. She needed gods she could manipulate, gods who demanded external rituals and public displays of power, but left the conscience clear to practice evil. She convinced Ahab to build an ivory palace. Imagine the luxury. Walls covered in carved ivory plaques, furniture encrusted with precious stones, and the scent of expensive perfumes from Egypt. She transformed the palace into a center of Phoenician culture. Little by little, Israel's elite began to find the faith of their ancestors outdated or too simple. Why serve an invisible God in the desert when we can have the glory of Baal here, now, at our banquets? They said. Jezebel used the classic technique of every manipulator, the deconstruction of identity. She began to replace spiritual leaders. She brought 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Ashtoreth. They were not just priests, they were the queen's image consultants. They ate at her table. They were paid by the national treasury. Israel was being financially and spiritually plundered to sustain a lie. And King Ahab? Ahab was the passive spectator of his own downfall. He loved the comfort Jezebel provided. He loved the ease with which she solved the inconvenient problems of the law. If God's law said, "Thou shalt not covet," Jezebel said, "You are the king. You can have whatever you want." This is the voice of manipulation. It always tells your ego what it wants to hear. But what Ahab did not see was the trail of blood beginning to stain the carpets of the ivory palace. The silence was ending. The clouds were vanishing. Judgment was no longer a distant possibility. It was already knocking at the door. Year after year, step by step, Jezebel's influence spread like gangrene. She began to hunt the prophets of the Lord. It was no longer a matter of religious preference. It was ethnic and spiritual cleansing. Anyone who spoke in the name of the God of Abraham was considered an enemy of the state. And fear became the currency of Israel. The faithful hid in caves. Truth became a clandestine whisper. Jezebel smiled on her throne, believing she had finally silenced the nation's conscience. But it is at this point that the story becomes impossible to ignore. While Jezebel organized her banquets, a man walked through the wilderness. He wore no silk, but camel hair. He drank not from golden cups, but from the brook of Cherith. His name was Elijah. He was God's antidote to Jezebel's poison. Ahab met him, and Elijah declared war. "As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, except at my word." Imagine the shock. In a culture that worshipped Baal as the Lord of storms, Elijah attacked exactly where Jezebel's pride rested. If Baal was the god of rain, why did the sky turn to bronze? The drought began, the grass withered, the rivers dried. Jezebel's makeup began to crack under the merciless sun of an Israel dying of thirst. Manipulation works as long as there are resources to distribute, but when the heavens close, the mask falls. Jezebel did not humble herself. She sought a scapegoat. She intensified the persecution, believing that if she killed Elijah, the rain would return. She did not understand that the drought was not physical. It was a reflection of the desert she herself had created in the soul of the people. 3 years and 6 months of bronze skies. Dust covered Jezebel's luxurious altars. Then the call came. Elijah reappeared and summoned a duel on Mount Carmel. On one side, 850 prophets of Jezebel, fed by the royal treasury, representing the height of political power. On the other side, one man alone, ye with nothing but the truth. Narcissism always seeks strength in numbers and appearance. Jezebel believed her crowd of prophets proved she was right, but truth does not need a majority to be true. The God who answers by fire, he is God. For hours the prophets of Jezebel screamed. They cut themselves until blood flowed, but there was no voice, no answer, no fire. Elijah mocked them. "Cry louder, perhaps he is sleeping." At evening, Elijah repaired the altar of the Lord. He used 12 stones. He drenched it in water, and with a prayer of only 60 words, the unthinkable happened. The fire of the Lord fell. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the water. The people fell on their faces. The Lord, he is God. The 850 prophets were executed. The foundation of the queen's power was cut at the root. The sky turned black, and a great rain fell. It seemed the light had won, but a narcissist does not bow to facts. They take revenge on the consequences. When Ahab told the queen what happened, she felt no fear of God. She felt personal rage. She sent a message to Elijah, "So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time." Elijah, the man who called down fire, fled in terror. Why? Because Jezebel did not attack his body, she attacked his mind. She projected an aura of inevitability. She made him believe that no matter what God did, she would have the last word. But God met him in a still small voice at Mount Horeb. He revealed that Elijah was not alone. There were 7,000 who had not bowed to Baal. The fall of Jezebel was being written in heaven, each while she still felt secure in her palace. Ahab coveted a vineyard belonging to a man named Naboth. Naboth refused to sell his inheritance. Ahab pouted like a spoiled child. Jezebel stepped in. "Are you not the king? I will give you the vineyard." She used the machinery of the state. She staged a fake trial. She hired sons of Belial to lie. Naboth was stoned to death under the guise of piety. This is the pinnacle of Jezebel's depravity, using the sacred to destroy the innocent. As Ahab went to take possession of the blood-stained land, Elijah was already there with a sentence. "In the place where dogs licked the blood of Naboth, dogs shall lick your blood, even yours. And concerning Jezebel, the dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel." Imagine the son of Israel shining on the grapes of Jezreel. King Ahab walks the land that once belonged to Naboth. He feels the earth. He touches the vines. He smiles with a sense of ownership. A narcissist believes the success of their crime is proof of their intelligence. He thinks, "I have won. Naboth is dead, and I have what I wanted." But then, a figure emerges from the shadows of the vines. Ahab's smile vanishes. Cold sweat pours down his face. He knows that mantle of hair. He knows that voice. "Have you found me, O my enemy?" the king asks, his voice trembling. Elijah uses no introductions. He uses no diplomacy. He answers with the weight of an anvil falling on glass. "I have found you, because you have sold yourself to do evil in the sight of the Lord." There, in the middle of the stolen property, the sentence was read, word for word, detail by detail. Judgment was pronounced. Years passed. Ahab died in battle, his blood licked by dogs just as prophesied. But Jezebel remained. She was now the queen mother. She thought she had outlived Elijah. She thought time had erased God's memory. But time, to God, is merely the stage where justice ripens. While Samaria lived in apparent peace, a new character was being prepared in the anonymity of the military ranks. His name was Jehu, a rough, impetuous man who drove his chariot like a madman. God sent a young prophet, dispatched by Elisha, to anoint Jehu in secret. The prophet entered the room where the generals were gathered, called Jehu to a private chamber, poured oil over his head, and gave the command, "You shall strike the house of Ahab your master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord, at the hand of Jezebel." Jehu's mission was not political, it was surgical. He was God's instrument to remove the cancer Jezebel had installed in the heart of the nation. Jehu wasted no time. He leapt into his chariot. The sound of wheels crushing the road's stones was the sound of approaching judgment. From afar, the sentinels in Jezreel saw the dust rising. "The driving is like the driving of Jehu, for he drives furiously," the watchman cried. King Joram, Jezebel's son, went out to meet Jehu. He asked, "Is it peace, Jehu?" Jehu's response is one of the most powerful moments in the Bible. "What peace, as long as the harlotries of your mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many?" Joram tried to flee, shouting, "Treachery!" But Jehu drew his bow with all his strength and struck the king between the shoulders. The arrow pierced the heart. Joram fell dead exactly in the field that once belonged to Naboth. The land of Naboth was being paid for with the blood of Jezebel's lineage. But the source of all evil was still within the walls. Jezebel heard the screams. She heard the thunder of Jehu's horses. She knew death was knocking at the gate. Imagine being there, in the palace courtyard. The smell of blood and dust is in the air. Jehu enters through the gates. He is a man of war, covered in sweat and fury. High above, in a tall window, Jezebel does the unthinkable. She does not flee. She does not hide in a cellar. She does not tear her clothes in repentance. She paints her eyes with antimony. She adorns her head with jewels. She dresses in her finest silks. Why did she do this? Because the manipulator believes in their own image until the very last second. She thought her beauty, even aged, or her majestic authority could intimidate Jehu. She wanted to die as a goddess, not a criminal. She leaned out the window and mocked Jehu with sarcasm. Had Zimri peace, who murdered his master? She compared Jehu to a traitor who lasted only 7 days on the throne. She tried, one last time, to use words to plant the seeds of fear and doubt. But Jehu didn't even look at her as a queen. He looked at her as an obstacle. He raised his face toward the window and shouted, "Who is on my side? Who?" 2 or 3 eunuchs appeared behind her. Men who had spent decades serving her, but who hated her deep down. They saw that Jezebel's power was an illusion that was crumbling. "Throw her down," Jehu commanded. There was no hesitation. Those who were once her servants became her executioners. Jezebel's body flew through the air. The impact against the ground was dry and brutal. Her blood splattered the walls and the horses. Jehu, showing absolute contempt, drove his chariot over her body. The wheels crushed the bones of the woman who once made the prophet Elijah tremble. He entered the palace and sat down to eat and drink. After a while he said, "Go now, see to this accursed woman and bury her, for she was a king's daughter." But when the soldiers arrived at the spot, the scene was one of horror. Elijah's prophecy had been fulfilled with mathematical precision. Nothing remained but her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. The dogs of Jezreel had devoured Jezebel's flesh. The ivory of the palace remained, but the woman who built it had become fertilizer for Naboth's land. Year after year, detail by detail, justice was delayed, but it did not fail. The story of Jezebel does not end with her disfigured corpse. It echoes through the millennia as a solemn warning. Narcissism and manipulation can build empires. They can silence prophets for a time. They can use the law to steal and religion to kill. They can paint themselves in the most vibrant colors and adorn themselves with the purest gold. But they cannot defeat time, and they cannot defeat the truth. Jezebel fell because she believed her own lie. She believed she was greater than the God who created the heavens and the earth. She believed people were objects, and that power was an end in itself. Today, the spirit of Jezebel continues to operate. It operates in abusive relationships, in corrupt power systems, and in hearts that seek self-glory above all else. But the lesson of Jezreel is clear. God's justice is not a matter of if, but of when. The fire always descends, the rain always returns, and ivory palaces always end in ruins. Do not fear the cries from the window. Do not let yourself be paralyzed by threats sent by messengers. The God of Elijah, the God who raised Jehu, and the God who comforted Naboth is still on the throne. The mask always falls. Truth always prevails. And in the end, only what was built on the rock of integrity and faith will remain standing. Did you think the blood of Jezreel ended the story? Think about it for a moment. Narcissism and manipulation do not die with the body of those who practice them. They are spiritual seeds that seek new soil to flourish. And the soil Jezebel chose was the heart of her own daughter, Athaliah. While Jehu was cleansing the northern kingdom, Jezebel's poison had already infiltrated the southern kingdom in Judah. Athaliah married the king of Jerusalem and carried with her the same agenda of destruction. When her son died, she did not weep as a mother. She acted as a tyrant. She rose and ordered the extermination of all the royal offspring. Imagine the scene, a grandmother hunting her own grandchildren so that no one would remain on the throne but her. It was the spirit of Jezebel's final attempt to break the lineage of the Messiah. If the line of David were cut, God's promise would fail. But just as in Naboth's vineyard, God had a hidden remnant. Little Joash was rescued and hidden in the temple for 6 years, while Athaliah reigned with an iron hand, and believing she had won. A narcissist always believes they have won when silence sets in. But God's silence is only the preparation for his roar. In the 7th year, Jehoiada the priest presented the true king. The people shouted, "Long live the king!" Athaliah ran to the temple shouting, "Treason, treason," the same words her mother had spoken years before. She was taken outside and executed near the horse entrance. Year after year, generation after generation, the pattern repeats. Religious and political narcissism tries to silence the lineage of promise, but it always ends up being trampled by the horses of history. Jezebel's lineage was wiped out, but the line of David produced the Savior. 1,000 years passed since the dogs licked Jezebel's blood. The ivory palace turned to dust. Ahab's name became a footnote. You see, but in the final pages of Revelation, the name of Jezebel resurfaces with a terrifying force. In the letter to the church in Thyatira, Jesus Christ himself raises his voice in a tone of maximum urgency. "Nevertheless, I have a few things against you, because you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess." Think about the depth of this. Jezebel was no longer a Phoenician queen. She had become a spiritual archetype. The spirit of Jezebel no longer dwells in stone palaces, but in structures of influence. It infiltrates where there is authority to be corrupted. How does it operate today? It still uses the same tools. The false prophecy. It claims to speak in the name of God, but its words serve only to enslave the wills of others. The seduction to immorality. It convinces God's servants that it's not quite like that sin can be tolerated in the name of modernity or success. The manipulation of emotions. It creates dependency. It isolates whoever confronts it, calling them unloving or traitors. Exactly as Jezebel did with Elijah and Jehu. Thyatira was a hard-working church, full of love and service, but it had a fatal flaw: tolerance. The spiritual narcissist only survives where there are people who are afraid to confront the lie. Where there is silence, Jezebel prospers. Where there is diplomacy with sin, she builds her throne. But Jesus' promise is as severe as Jezebel's fate in Jezreel. "Indeed, I will cast her into a sickbed, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation. And I will kill her children with death." This is not an ancient sermon. It is a warning for now. The spirit of manipulation seeks your control, seeks your spiritual heritage, your vineyard of Naboth. It wants you to trade your identity in God for a banquet at the queen's table. But remember, Jezebel's table is lavish, but its end is the void. We are reaching the climax of this cinematic journey. Look back and see the progression. We saw a Phoenician princess rise to power, a weak king sell himself to greed, a prophet of fire challenge the impossible, and a painted queen fall into oblivion. What have we learned? We learned that manipulation has an expiration date. Narcissism can shout loud from the window, but it has no roots in eternity. The story of Jezebel is the story of the conflict between the human ego and divine sovereignty. It represents everything man tries to build apart from God, a power structure based on fear, image, and oppression. But Elijah represents the remnant. Naboth represents the integrity that is not for sale. Jehu represents the justice that does not waver. Perhaps you feel you are living under the dominion of a Jezebel in your life. whether a person, a system, or an invisible pressure that tries to silence you. Perhaps you feel like Elijah under the broom tree, tired of fighting a structure that seems invincible. Listen closely. Jezebel is not invincible. Her makeup hides a deep fear of the judgment she knows is coming. Her ivory is fragile, and the God who answered by fire on Carmel is still mindful of the blood of the innocent that cries out from the ground. The story ends where truth begins. Jezebel's fall was ugly, it was brutal, and it was definitive. Nothing of her was left to be buried so that no one could make a pilgrimage to her grave. Evil should not be celebrated, it should be forgotten or used as a warning. Israel survived, faith survived, the line of the Messiah survived. May this script echo in your mind like a trailer for an eternal reality. The world will see many Jezebels rise to power. The world will hear many promises of seduction, but those who remain faithful to the heritage of their fathers, those who do not bow their knees before the altar of the ego, they will see the rain fall, they will see the fire descend, and in the end, they will see the King of Kings establish a kingdom where manipulation has no entry and where truth shines like the noonday sun. The window is open, Jehu is at the gate. The time for tolerance is over. Choose today whom you will serve. For Jezebel's fate has already been sealed by the dogs of Jezreel, but your fate can be sealed by the blood of the Lamb who conquered the world. It was no legend, it was no imagination, it was God's reckoning. The ivory throne fell. The jewels were lost in the dust. The queen became just a worn memory. Think about it, analyze it, and never forget. Justice may be slow, but it gallops with the fury of Jehu. And when it arrives, no makeup hides the face of truth. The Lord is God, yesterday, today, and forever. Jezebel's story doesn't end with this video. It ends with the decision you make now. The spirit of manipulation hates the light, and the best way to fight the shadows is by spreading the truth you just heard. And if this message made your heart burn and opened your eyes to the enemy's tricks, seal this commitment. Write in the comments the phrase, "The Lord is God." Let the world's algorithm understand that here exists a remnant that does not bend. Pass the warning. This video is not entertainment. It is an alert. Send it to someone you know who is facing a spiritual war or a manipulation that seems invincible. Be the messenger of someone's deliverance today. Stay on guard, subscribe, and hit the bell. We are raising an army of minds awakened by the scriptures, and the next revelation will be even deeper. Jezebel's ivory fell, but the word of the Lord remains forever, until the next chapter of our journey.